Tonight, on 24, security meetings in Israel coincide with increased U.S. regional troop deployments. As Witkoff and Kushner plan their trip for the Geneva meeting, the U.S. has begun evacuating embassy staff from Beirut. Netanyahu says complex days lie ahead.
In Iran's national lion and sun revolution, many honorable forces defying suppressive orders stood with the people.
Prince Reza Pahlavi's new message about the solidarity of some armed forces with protesters in Iran. He says a number of police and army forces refrained from shooting at people during the protests. On the third day of student protests in Iran, cries of death to the dictator swept through universities.
From Iran International, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Good evening to Iran International viewers in Iran and abroad. Coinciding with the deployment of more U.S. forces in the region and rising tensions with Tehran, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut began evacuating some of its staff from Lebanon a few hours ago. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are scheduled to travel to Geneva Thursday for a new round of negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. Informed sources say these talks might be the last diplomatic opportunity before a potential escalation of tensions. Let's go to the State Department. My colleague Samira Karai has joined us from there. Samira, many view this as likely the last meeting before tensions escalate.
That's right, especially because of that proposal, or that written text, that the Islamic Republic was supposed to present, and well, it was said in the second round. That the Islamic Republic should go and put those proposals, which it had presented orally, and apparently, I don't mean they weren't accepted, but the U.S. hadn't completely rejected the Islamic Republic, it should go and put them in writing with more details. It seems that we should, in a way, consider the third round as the last round where they meet in this state. And after this, if a meeting is to take place, it means that common goals have been found. These discussions remain ongoing. In developments from the U.S. State Department, Mr. Ruby traveled to Israel, where he was supposed to meet with Mr. Netanyahu on Saturday. But informed American officials now report that this trip and plan have undergone changes. Israel says Monday, the reasons are unclear, but this trip was also postponed. Aside from current developments, significant attention focuses on media coverage of Trump's advisors, including Pentagon briefings and how General Keane communicates his military decisions to Mr. Trump. In the region right now, the discussion about the evacuation of non-essential U.S. embassy staff in Beirut has been very newsworthy. The U.S. State Department announced this today, asking those employees to leave the embassy, to leave Beirut. This suggests tensions in Lebanon will rise. Over the past 48 hours, Israeli media reported that the Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force is focusing on Hezbollah. Forces have arrived, and the Times of Israel claims the Quds Force has assumed command. Consequently, the Quds Force would directly launch missile attacks on Israel from Lebanon at their own discretion. Fardad.
Thank you, my colleague Samira Karai, U.S. State Department.
نیروهای آمدند حتی در جایی تایمز آف اسرائیل نوشته بود که کنترل و فرماندهی حزب الله لبنان رو الان سپاه قدس در دست گرفته و به این معناست که اگر حمله صورت بگیره اونها خودشون سپاه قدسی‌ها به رأی و نظر خودشون به اسرائیل از اونجا حمله موشکی انجام خواهند داد. الان همه این تحولات هست. برگردم به اون بخش ژنرال کین که گفتم با آقای ترامپ صحبت‌های کرده. روز چهارشنبه اتاق بحران جلسه تشکیل شده. ژنرال کین هم بوده، همیشه جزو این کابینه امنیتی آقای ترامپ هست. ترامپ ازش پرسیده که چه امکاناتی داریم، سناریوها چه هست. همه رو برای آقای ترامپ توضیح داده، نگفته که حمله بکن یا نکن. گفته من در این رابطه نمیتونم نظری به تو بدم، تصمیم خود تو هست، ولی این امکانات رو ما داریم. میدونیم که فورت هم الان دور و بر کرت در یونان، جزیره جنوبی یونان دیده شده. انتظار میره در یک دو روز آینده برسه به سواحل تل‌آویو. فرداد.
ممنونم از تو همکارم سمیرا قرایی از وزارت خارجه آمریکا. Amid rising U.S.-Iran tensions, Israeli media published images of American refueling aircraft at Ben Gurion, a move assessed as signaling strengthened U.S. military readiness in the region. Concurrently, reports say the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford has also entered Suda Bay in Crete, as Samira noted. A NATO military base is located on this Greek island. According to military sources, the ship has stopped in Suda Bay to receive supplies from this U.S. military base. General Chuck Wald, former U.S. European Command Deputy Commander, joins from Cape Cod. He is currently a senior fellow at the Jewish Institute, JINSA. General, thank you for accepting our invitation. The U.S. military presence in the region is expanding daily. The second United States aircraft carrier has now entered the Mediterranean and is currently on the verge of reaching the eastern Mediterranean. Do you think this amount of assets, what you're seeing, can mostly be used for deterrence and negotiation? Or, as many are assessing, is it for an offensive action?
Thank you very much for your invitation. I think, in order to answer your question, we must say that the U.S., the President, and our administration want an agreement with the Iranians, but an agreement preventing their nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and threats to the Gulf Cooperation Council and Israel, and that they don't rebuild their proxy forces again in Lebanon and other places in the region. I think that would be ideal for the U.S., but honestly, it's unlikely. The alternative is to threaten military action. The force that, perhaps you know, the U.S. has deployed and amassed in the Middle East, both the aircraft carrier Lincoln near the Strait of Hormuz, and now the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford in the eastern Mediterranean, along with B-52s and other ships, are all very significant. Also, we have a lot of refueling tankers. And as we remember, last June, the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran with Operation Rising Lions and Midnight Hammer. And, well, that force is absolutely not comparable to the force they've deployed in the region now. I think that if the Iranian regime doesn't agree to an acceptable outcome in negotiations with Messrs. Wydikoff and Kushner, we will see military action.
We know that the Islamic Republic has threatened to drag the war into the region. Not official authorities, but Iranian government analysts on state TV are discussing targeting objectives in regional countries. How serious do you think this concern can be in practice that Iran, especially if it feels the government is collapsing, would take the war much further, drag it to other countries, to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and other places?
I consider this to be a serious threat. I think that if the regime sees its back against the wall, then it will feel it has to do whatever it can to stay in power. We saw this in how they suppressed protesters in December and January. Therefore, I don't think this regime should be allowed to remain in power. And, well, neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, maybe not Qatar, but certainly Israel, they might join in. This extends to specific operations and anything else they can possibly do to put pressure on America and probably Israel itself to finally stop Iran's attacks. My feeling is that, like an animal that's trapped in a corner, potentially, when they see that they are being overthrown, this will be a very dangerous animal. But I don't think that Iran's military force has the power to inflict a lot of damage on the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. While they certainly retain the capacity to create chaos in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, catching them off guard with sudden, overwhelming military operations would likely render those threats entirely ineffective. They won't be able to show the necessary reaction.
General, now if the president takes you to the Situation Room and says, all right, we severely limited Iran's nuclear capability in Operation Midnight Hammer, and we're also the strongest army in the world. This is no ordinary government. It might close the Strait of Hormuz. The Persian Gulf littoral states have a lot of wealth and are, in a way, in glass towers. They are very vulnerable. Can you guarantee me that with the U.S. military capability, in a few hours or in a few days, we can cripple the Islamic Republic to such an extent that it won't be a threat to U.S. interests, nor a danger to our allies? Can such a guarantee be given to the president?
My feeling is that, well, the word guarantee is always a dangerous word, but I believe that, and I know that, there's always a risk. There's always a risk. We must be careful. But I firmly believe that the force we have now deployed in the Middle East, which are essentially American forces, and so far, I hope Israel is also part of those attacks, but this force can defeat Iran's armed forces. Naturally, regime change is a separate discussion. That depends on the people of Iran and the population of that country. But if we look at it militarily, purely from a military standpoint, not diplomatic, there is no doubt in my mind that the forces we have in the Persian Gulf and the Persian Gulf region and the Mediterranean region, I hope we also see B-2 planes deployed from Diego Garcia. Now, I think that either in one day or in a few days, we can definitely get rid of Iran's ballistic missiles and destroy all offensive forces that, well, they might have or might not have. Frankly, Iran's armed forces are not very strong in terms of equipment at this point.
If you could briefly say, General, since you mentioned regime change in Iran, many say that regime change might not be possible with only airstrikes. Do you think this perception is correct, or can one imagine a scenario where, for example, American forces attack from the air, and then something happens on the ground that leads to the fall of the regime?
Well, to reiterate, I must proceed with considerable caution here, principally because our historical track record regarding regime change has demonstrated inconsistent results characterized by a complex mix of victories and failures. I don't think Iran's armed forces have much power right now, but regime change depends on the people of Iran. Naturally, an animal trapped in a corner might be dangerous, and it's the people of Iran who must decide whether they want to defeat the regime or not after it has been militarily defeated.
Thank you. General Chuck Wald, former Deputy Commander of U.S. European Command, joined us from Massachusetts. Israel's prime minister said an hour ago in the Knesset that Israel is ready for any scenario. And, according to him, the Iranian regime commits the biggest mistake in its history and attacks Israel. It will be responded to with unimaginable force. Netanyahu warns of complex days ahead. No one knows what tomorrow brings. Although, according to him, Israel has kept its eyes open and is ready for any eventuality. Meanwhile, Yair Lapid, leader of the opposition and Netanyahu's political rival, has said that in case of military action against Iran, he will put aside all internal disagreements with Netanyahu and unite with the Israeli government. Researcher Shahram Holdi joins from Ontario. Mr. Holdi, Israel's prime minister. He claims Israel is ready for all situations, but doesn't hide his concerns about the unknowns ahead either.
Greetings to you, dear Mr. Farzad and the brave people of Iran. Yes, your observation is completely correct. It is crucial that one does not forget that, ultimately, Benjamin Netanyahu is a prime minister who actually holds a formidable record encompassing 30 years of experience. Over the past 30 years, he's been prime minister 7 or 8 times, facing various situations. But every time he's left the premiership, perhaps with the exception of the period when Mr. Naftali Bennett was prime minister, Israel consistently adopted a strategic stance that was directly passive towards the Islamic Republic itself, while prioritizing efforts to strike a regime's various proxies operating within the region. And this last period of Mr. Netanyahu's premiership, now I don't mean last as in the final one, but this period we are currently in, it shows Netanyahu completely changed his national security outlook. And where he's talking about something he doesn't know, in my opinion, he's probably talking about a series of capabilities that, after all, the Islamic Republic possesses and has used before in the 12-Day War. And it's true that in the 12-Day War, the Israelis only had 29 killed, but for a country like Israel, with that size, and given the democratic commitment that the Israeli government actually has towards its responsibility to protect its citizens, unlike a government like the Islamic Republic, which not only accepts no responsibility for protecting its citizens, but according to Dr. Payam Akavan, actively might even have committed an Iranian Holocaust last December. We can see he is concerned that if even one missile the Islamic Republic might launch towards Israel in case of a conflict between the Islamic Republic and the United States of America passes through Israel's air defense shield. After all, for the people of Israel and Jews worldwide, even that one missile is considered an existential threat.
Mr. Holdy, Mr. Netanyahu had many ups and downs during his leadership, and his legacy is also mixed. How much do you think he might actually see a potential attack on Iran as an opportunity to play an ace card politically and be able to link his legacy with the potential overthrow of the Islamic Republic?
I'm very pleased you mentioned legacy, because, as you are aware, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on collective memory, turning now to the 1979 revolution. There is not a single politician, statesman, or stateswoman anywhere in the world today who does not pay close attention to crafting their own significant political and historical legacy. And this issue is especially important for someone like Netanyahu because he is in a catalog of people who are historically first-rate. Now, whether we are talking about David Ben-Gurion, or, let me tell you, Golda Meir, or even Menachem Begin, so it's very important for him, especially considering what we saw in 2006 in the confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah, where Israel failed to remove the threat of Hezbollah from the people of Israel, and even the people of Lebanon. The consequences of conflict, even victory, are vital for his legacy. Now, the question remains, as I mentioned to you before, a core sentiment remains that Israelis never necessarily trust even their most steadfast ally, the United States, to view the existential threat looming over Israel, particularly from the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the absolute gravity and urgency that Israelis themselves perceive. And if the Islamic Republic reaches the point of attempting a preemptive suicidal act, in that event, the Israelis will certainly not wait for the United States of America to act. I believe the Israelis have carefully considered this matter, and during the 7 or 8 occasions that Mr. Netanyahu has met with Mr. Trump, he has made a point to remind him of it every single time. The question is, if Israel engages the Islamic Republic, not America, Mr. Trump will have no choice but to rise to the support and defense of the Israelis.
Thank you, Sharon Holdy, Middle East historian and researcher from Ontario. An hour ago, Prince Reza Pahlavi, by publishing a message on the X network referring to the role of military and law enforcement forces in the protests and emphasizing their defiance of the regime's repressive orders, said, "Reports show some police and army refuse to fire, leading the regime to use plainclothes forces, Basij, IRGC, and mercenaries to kill protesters."
Compatriots, Iran is on the verge of historic transformation. And its determining factor is still the will and conscious action of the Iranian people. It is us who must play our key role at the right time and not allow scenarios contrary to the nation's will to be imposed on the country. In this path, the role of military, law enforcement, security forces, and the body of government agencies is decisive. In Iran's national lion and sun revolution, many honorable forces stood with the people by disobeying suppressive orders. Reliable reports indicate that especially police and army forces refrained from using weapons against the people, and the regime used plainclothes forces, Basij, IRGC, and non-Iranian mercenaries for the killings. The disclosure of documents and images of the killings and the identity of their perpetrators, the delivery of the bodies of the deceased, assistance to detainees, help in rescuing medical staff, and the formation of underground clinics were among the actions carried out with the cooperation of dissenting forces within government institutions. However, clearly, these forces lack the numbers and resources to match the regime's repressive apparatus, making international humanitarian intervention necessary to create a balance of power. Now that the likelihood of such intervention is higher than ever, a limited opportunity remains for military and law enforcement commanders, especially army commanders, and other officials whose hands are not stained with the nation's blood, to separate themselves from the criminal regime. The ultimate choice is yours to make today. By joining the people, you save your life and your family's security, partaking in the nation's absolute victory. Alternatively, you tie your fate to the shattered ship of the Islamic Republic and sink into oblivion with Khamenei and his failing regime.
Naveed Mohebbi, a political analyst from Washington, joined us. Mr. Mohebbi, it's clear that most of his message is directed at the military and law enforcement forces, especially considering it's clear that even if there's an attack from the US, American ground forces won't be involved. I guess in a situation where the Islamic Republic system is overthrown, those military forces who don't cooperate or align with the government will play a key role. Prince Reza Pahlavi has a few times in the past and now mentioned numbers and figures indicating people from within the system are in contact with him. We don't know the full extent of it, but in your opinion, how key could their role really be in preparing the conditions for a change of government in the event of a foreign military attack?
Hello to you and to the dear compatriots watching this program. Look, ever since Prince Reza Pahlavi announced a platform for national cooperation, tens of thousands of internal government officials across various layers and different organizations have declared their readiness and are currently assisting the people of Iran. However, this question might be raised, well then, when they were killing people, where were these forces? These forces were at work. However, a significant segment of the repressive forces continues to actively cooperate with the Islamic Republic. Consequently, any internal elements wishing to assist can only truly fulfill that role when a specifically advantageous and safe opportunity for intervention finally emerges. This warning from Prince Reza Pahlavi is not an analysis, it is a fact. Individuals inside Iran cooperating with Prince Reza Pahlavi's team are currently helping the Iranian people, among other mentioned actions. In this situation, a military attack is highly probable. Some government officials, in their own imagination, are preparing for the post-Khamenei era, and names have been mentioned, and these individuals have also been referred to in Iran international programs. The reality is that in the event of any so-called action where these forces might imagine they want to seize power, that's a pipe dream. Iranians, both inside and outside the country, will strongly resist this action, as we saw that despite all the repression, people are still resisting, and we saw the latest example of that in the universities. Prince Reza Pahlavi's international allies will also be alongside the people of Iran in this path. It's not just an action from the US or others. Numerous forces will help the people of Iran. Therefore, we need to be careful and not allow any actions where after the killing of Khamenei or his leaders, individuals from within the system might imagine they can seize power. That won't happen, and Prince Reza Pahlavi and the people of Iran will resist any such actions.
But my question was more about how much, in your opinion, that capacity Prince Reza Pahlavi refers to. At one point, there was talk of 50,000 contacts. Now, maybe less, maybe more. How much of that capacity do you think is exploitable if the foundations of the government become unstable?
Look, as Prince Reza mentioned, many of those involved in these repressions were Basij and IRGC forces, and I say this based on information that has reached Prince Reza Pahlavi's team. But the reality is that there are many other forces inside the country as well. So who leaked these massacre documents abroad, identified individuals, and gave out information? Actually, it's those inside the apparatuses of this government. When an attack happens, many of those who will be involved in these massacres will be targeted, and at that time, a suitable environment will be created for the forces that have, defected to be able to play their role. See, the people inside the country and these defecting forces themselves actually know better about the shaky position of the Islamic Republic. They will recognize the opportune moment and act accordingly. But the people must also be on the scene. And if they, so to speak, want to remove Khamenei and come to power themselves, this issue will not be acceptable and will be met with resistance from the people and international supporters of the Iranian National Revolution movement. One point, is that in recent days, the Iranian National Revolution Television, which is under the direct supervision of Prince Reza Pahlavi's team, has launched on Yahsat satellite. It's currently in the experimental phase, and at the appointed time, the instructions and directives of Prince Reza Pahlavi and his team will be given daily to the people inside the country. So Prince Reza Pahlavi's team has, prepared and planned for various scenarios, and more than 100 specialists in various fields are collaborating on this program. Actually, if I want to answer your question again, in a situation where these defecting forces, envision that it's the right time, they will act. But most importantly, is the vigilance of the Iranian people against any scenario that ignores their demands and wants to, in fact, keep this government in its place under other titles.
Thank you. Naveed Mohebbi, political analyst from Washington. In Iran, student protests are continuing for the third consecutive day, featuring widespread gatherings and anti-government slogans. In several universities, students set fire to the flag of the Islamic Republic and raised the lion and sun flag. Students from Sharif and Al-Zawra universities in Tehran demanded renaming them to their pre-1979 titles, Aryamer and Fardad Farahzad. Besieged forces and plainclothes agents clashed with students at a number of universities.
Names the other side. Al-Zahra, that's what the other side is its name. Al-Zahra, that's what the other side is its name. Al-Zahra, that's what named other side. Al-Zahra, that's what names the other side. Al-Zahra, that's what the other side is its name. Al-Zahra, that's what names the other side. Al-Zahra, that's what the other side is its name. Al-Zahra, that's what names the other side. Al-Zahra limit names the other side. Al-Zahra limit. The Shah makes his return to his country, while the full, imposing strength of the Shah's vast army marches immediately and closely right behind him. The Shah finally returns to the borders of his beloved country, while the formidable ranks of the Shah's loyal army follow right behind him, ready to secure his presence in the land. Out! Iran, be free! Mullahs, out! Iran, be free! Mullahs, out! Iran, be free! Mullahs, out! Iran, be free! We pray that the great Shahanshah finds eternal tranquility and that his noble soul rests in perfect peace forever. Shameless! 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 Shameless!
Students at Sharif University, too, hung a toy mouse from a tree at the gathering on Monday, Esfand 4th. At recent gatherings, Mushali slogans were chanted against Ali Khamenei. This term entered Iranian discourse after Khamenei went into hiding in a bunker following an Israeli attack. Mustafa Danishgar, political analyst from Detroit, and Mehdi Arabshahi, political analyst from Washington, are with us. Thank you to both of you. Mr. Danishgar, the courage the students are showing is just astonishing. After this unprecedented killing, isn't it relatively easier to identify students in a university's closed environment? Burning the flag of the Islamic Republic, hanging a mouse from a tree, these aren't things that the Islamic Republic can just easily suppress.
Greetings to you, the other guests, and the viewers and listeners of Iran International. Yes, you see, the issue is exactly what was predicted and what was expected. In this specific round of protests, distinguishable from all previous periods of unrest, one fact remains strikingly clear and undeniable. It is apparent that the regime's latent and rampant tactics of suppression, severe intimidation, and lethal violence, including the public display of brutality intended to instill fear, have ultimately failed, despite the government drawing these harsh lines across every sector. These aggressive measures have proven completely ineffective at halting the relentless momentum of the protest machine. Such anger has accumulated in society because of this killing and this crime against humanity. Such anger, such hatred, such resentment, which of course isn't just about the killing either. This situation is the direct result of systematically neglecting a crucial segment of the population for many years. This repressed dissatisfaction has finally boiled over, breaching the boundaries of broader society and penetrating the lecture halls and campuses of universities within the Islamic Republic. This has happened even though the regime spent decades attempting to insulate these academic environments through rigorous vetting, strict ideological interviews, and exclusionary filtering filtering processes designed to purify and secure that intellectual stronghold. But now, the situation in the country, which of course the opening of a window called foreign intervention, a product of the Islamic Republic's confrontation with the world, its belligerence, its confrontational nature, its anti-order policies, all of this has come together to open a horizon, not just for the people in the streets, but now in another stronghold that the Islamic Republic has always used alongside the street stronghold, to create a distance between these two. Now, either an ideological, temporal, or spatial distance. Meaning, it would use the fact that the university environment would be an isolated environment, a closed environment, and the street would be separate. They would circulate in two different spaces and atmospheres. But now, at a historical moment, the Islamic Republic's foreign policy, its domestic policy, and the accumulation of its demands, and its policy regarding protest management, and the issue of the academic environment, and the events and interactions that have been under the skin of the university, under the skin of the city all these years, they've all come together and are now collapsing on the Islamic Republic and surprising everyone. Surprising everyone. Even politicians and activists see the courage at the 1404 martyr ceremonies linking with student protests, as one movement is now strengthening the other. You see, the 40th day ceremony for the martyrs of the killing and crime against humanity of 1404 is now linking up with student protests. And one is, so to speak, strengthening the other. One is giving the other new momentum, a new driving force, and pushing it forward. This has been unprecedented. It stems from anger, resentment, and hatred, where a combination of internal and external factors has converged. This has put students in a situation where they fearlessly and recklessly target all symbols of the Islamic Republic, extending from the name of the university to its leader, its flag, and its slogans. From the university's name to its leader, its flag, and its slogans. Meaning, the slogans are also slogans that are different. We are witnessing a shift in the paradigm that has dominated the university. Meaning, those slogans that were exclusive, a specific group used to create those slogans. They used to work on them for many years, for continuous years. This too is now in the hands of another group. In new hands, this rare phenomenon sees the university voicing right-wing slogans. You could say it's a rare phenomenon, but now we see the university is giving right-wing slogans. Mr. Arab Shahi, what should it do? What can the Islamic Republic do with this situation? Because it's a two-edged sword, right? On one hand, it wants to keep universities open to show that conditions are normal, but on the other hand, if it keeps them open, well, it can't stop these kinds of protests.
Greetings to you, our guest and viewers. The reality is that reopening universities showed the anger and excitement still existing under the skin of society. The 40th day ceremonies are conducted with great passion and excitement. However, some may perceive these gatherings as different from the general societal atmosphere. This distinction arises from their special characteristics, particularly the presence of the families and close ones of these individuals, which establishes a unique and intimate dynamic. The reopening of the university offers the first opportunity for society to leave that 40th day atmosphere and show its protest. 3 days have passed since the reopening, and we witnessed students at various universities courageously chanting slogans. It is imaginable that such brave actions against the entirety of the Islamic Republic will entail significant costs for those who choose to come out. It is likely that students acting courageously against the Islamic Republic will face costs.
دانشجویانی که اینطور میان و شجاعانه در واقع علیه کلیت جمهوری اسلامی عمل میکنن.
I think anyway, the Islamic Republic has no choice but to, well, more or less, definitely move towards suppressing this space. Now, maybe they are holding on to the hope that there is only a very short time remaining until the upcoming Nowruz holidays. They might more or less just try to manage this awkward period somehow so that it passes quickly. It is even possible that they will decide to dismiss the students earlier than expected and send them home. They'll definitely go for more repression, summoning people, using disciplinary committee rulings, and even filing legal cases against individuals. But the Islamic Republic's old formula hasn't actually worked out here. This formula was always that they come in to a really heavy round of repression, and then, actually, for several months or even sometimes several years, society would just go quiet. But now we're seeing they've actually carried out the heaviest repression and killings in the history of the Islamic Republic. It's been a little over 40 days since then, and we see how wherever people get a chance, they come out and protest, and the atmosphere of fear hasn't really taken hold at all. And this shows that that model of repression just isn't working anymore. This shows that a model of repression isn't working anymore. We face a unique situation, essentially defined by the revolutionary conditions the country finds itself in.
Mr. Danishgar, you brought up something at the end of the last question that really caught my attention, that universities are actually chanting right-wing slogans. Well, universities in Iran and elsewhere are known as environments that are usually liberal, as they tend to lean a bit to the left. How can we explain current events in Iran where right-wing slogans are being heard in universities? Why are we hearing right-wing slogans in academic settings?
Look, anyway, this is the result of decades of the Islamic Republic's politicking. Basically, regarding the 57 revolution, I am not concerned with the exact accuracy of the narrative. Instead, my focus is on the general understanding and common sense that has formed within Iranian public opinion. This prevailing perception has also spilled over into the universities, where you are clearly seeing it now too. And what is that? Well, sir, that ominous phenomenon. The 57 revolution happened due to the complicity between the Shiite clergy and the leftists. And now, regarding the leftists, I know they are diverse, featuring all sorts of different currents. They are colorful, and so on. I am fully aware of that complexity. However, I am talking about a general perception that students, too, have gradually not been excluded from sharing. The Islamic Republic was different, if you came in the 80s, if you came during the Green Movement, even up to 98, the student slogans weren't these kinds of slogans. Or if they were, they weren't this loud and clear. But the policies of the Islamic Republic and, the gradual deadlock that the Islamic Republic created, its obstruction, it led the general public, or a significant part of it, and universities were a part of this, to the idea that, look, this revolution, this thing we're dealing with now, this cancerous tumor that's not straight on any path, it can't be reformed at all. We have to go after its roots. And a very popular narrative, one that you could likely somewhat empathize with, is essentially this. These student movements, the student movement that was controlled and dominated by the left, or the Islamic associations, the so-called Muslim leftists were in charge, or the leftists were in charge. They are responsible for our current situation. This overflowed into society and universities. And what we're seeing now are these right-wing slogans demanding the return of the monarchy. They're chanting in favor of Prince Reza Pahlavi. At Al-Azhar University, they even chanted in favor of Empress Farah Pahlavi. These are the product of this conclusion and this common sense that has formed, regardless of, and I emphasize again, how accurate it might be. I'm not saying this from a position of supporting the left either, but it's probably not super accurate. But the thing is, it's formed now. The Islamic Republic has created a deadlock, and the university, just like other parts of Iranian society, is shouting slogans and pointing fingers at elements that basically deny the entirety and totality of the Islamic Republic, both its present and its past. Among this past is precisely the past connection that this revolution, this ominous 57 phenomenon, had with the left and leftist currents and leftism, and the student movements which are considered responsible. And during this whole time, each of them in some way collaborated with a repressive system, with the Islamic Republic system at certain times. For example, in the 60s, the Office for Strengthening Unity, and so on. Now we know what the story and the process are. And now, institutions that leaned toward the reformists are faltering. With reforms hitting a dead end, what Mr. Khamenei effectively did was cool everything down with him. This encompasses traditional institutions established in universities, like the Office for Strengthening Unity. Additionally, through security actions that sowed discord and dispersed these groups, we have reached a critical point where all those traditional institutions are now disappearing from the landscape.
I apologize. My time is running out. Mustafa Daneshgar and Mehdi Arabshahi, thank you both, and thank you for watching 24.